Welcome. This video is an introduction to the Middle School United States History Framework for the state of Maryland. It will discuss how the items that students will encounter on the MCAP Social Studies 8 assessment are aligned to the assessment limits contained in the framework. This new assessment will be administered beginning in the spring of 2022 to all 8th grade students in Maryland. Links to important websites and information can be found in the YouTube video description. All social studies courses required in COMAR have associated frameworks. The first page of the framework contains a description of the 6 social studies standards. The remainder of the framework is organized chronologically around 7 units of study. The first and last units are not assessed on MCAP since they are bridge units between previous or future courses. The framework document is used to guide curriculum development at the local level. Throughout all social studies courses, students will engage in the skills and processes outlined in Standard 6.0. Organizing these skills is the inquiry arc, which provides a structure to facilitate effective instruction in social studies. It includes 4 components: formulating questions, using disciplinary tools, evaluating sources, and sharing conclusions. The inquiry arc drives instruction across all social studies courses pre-K through 12. The skills from Standard 6.0 are assessed using a unique item type known as an EBUS, or evidence-based argument set. Let's examine the framework more closely. Here is a sample unit template. It includes a unit enduring understanding, which is the overarching conceptual guideline for the unit. Below that is the unit question. Everything in the unit contributes to answering this question. Below that, beginning on the left, are the content topic, essential question, indicator and objectives, and finally, the assessment limits. In relation to the new Social Studies 8 assessment, the assessment limits portion of the framework is very important. What exactly are assessment limits anyway? As indicated in the framework, the assessment limits designate the topics that can have questions written to measure student understanding. If topics do not appear in the assessment limits, then students cannot be held accountable for knowing that information. Here is a portion of the framework from the Civil War and Reunion unit, page 14. The far right column is titled Assessment Limits. It reads as follows: economic opportunities, obstacles, draft riots, bread riots, inflation, increase in industry. In terms of the MCAP assessment, what exactly are students responsible for knowing about these topics? A definition, where and when they occurred, the causes or consequences of each? In order to answer that question, it is best to work backward through the framework, or in this case, move to the left. The column to the left of assessment limits is the indicator and objectives. These give a broader context for the more specific topics listed in the assessment limits. Here you will find that students are expected to evaluate the effectiveness of the United States government in protecting the rights of individuals and groups during the Civil War. How are they expected to do that? By describing economic opportunities and obstacles faced by soldiers, civilians, free and enslaved populations. Now let's examine a sample question from the practice test written to this assessment limit. What was one effect of the Civil War on the Northern economy? A, agricultural production decreased. B, factory production increased. C, inflation decreased. D, unemployment increased. The correct answer is B. This item is meant to assess the student's content knowledge about economic effects during the war, specifically the increase in industry experienced in the North. When examining assessment limits in the framework, it is important to always look to the broader categories to the left, the indicator and objectives, to understand the full context for what students are responsible for knowing. Now you will learn how sample MCAP questions align to the assessment limits. Here is a sample selected response question that appears on the full-length practice test. Which event most contributed to the United States Declaration of War on Mexico in 1846? A, the movement of settlers into the Oregon Territory. B, the discovery of gold in California, C, disputes along the border of Texas, D, disputes along the border of the Louisiana Territory. The correct answer is C. Now we will refer back to the framework to understand how this question aligns to the assessment limits. Here is a snapshot of the associated portion of the framework which relates to this question. It appears on page 13 of the framework in the Geographic Expansion and Political Division unit. The objective states that students will explain the causes of the Mexican-American War. And if we refer back to the question, that is exactly what is being asked. What event most contributed to or caused the U.S. to declare war on Mexico? Here is a second sample selected response question that appears on the practice test. Study the diagram. The figure shows a cause and effect diagram with 3 steps flowing from left to right as follows. Statement 1, the Erie Canal opens. Statement 2, blank. Statement 3, trade between the East and the West increases. Which statement completes this cause and effect diagram? A, the cost of shipping goods decreases. B, steamboats are invented. C, the national road opens. D, interchangeable parts are invented. The correct answer is A. Now we will refer back to the framework to understand how this question aligns to the assessment limits. Here is a snapshot of the framework from page 11. Reading the indicator and objectives, we will find that students will assess the impact of technological developments in communication and transportation. And if we go back to the question, students must use the information in the diagram to find the appropriate answer to demonstrate the impact that canals had on transportation. Here is a third and final sample question that appears on the practice test. Study the diagram. What 2 phrases correctly complete the diagram about the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments? Drag the phrases to the correct boxes. The answer choices are as follows. Women have no voice in the government. Colleges do not admit women. Women are not allowed to serve in the military. State constitutions are rewritten. Women abolitionists fight for equality. The figure shows a diagram titled Declaration of Rights and Sentiments that has 2 sets of information. Each set has 2 text boxes separated by an arrow with a word in it that indicates a relationship between the information in the 2 boxes. Each set includes a box to represent a missing phrase. The contents of the 2 sets of information are as follows. First set, women must obey laws. However, blank. Second set, blank. Therefore, women cannot get an education. This is a technology enhanced item, not a selected response. Although students interact with these items differently, they still must align to the assessment limits. The correct answer is women have no voice in the government corresponds to the first set or box in the upper right of the diagram, and colleges do not admit women corresponds to the second set or box in the lower left. Let's examine how this question aligns to the assessment limits. This snapshot about the women's movement appears on page 12 of the framework. The objective states that students will trace the evolution, arguments, and impacts of the antebellum women's movement. And if we refer back to the question, students must use their content knowledge and the information in the diagram to arrive at the correct answer, which outlines 2 impacts of the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments. In summary, the new MCAP Social Studies assessment items are written using the framework document as a guide. More specifically, the assessment limits outlined in the framework define the topics that can have questions written to measure student understanding across the 6 standards and 5 chronological units that are assessed. Please take note of the resources available on the marylandpublicschools.org website. A link to this site is available in the video description. On this site, you will find links to many valuable resources, including those mentioned in this video. Thank you and have a great day.